Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Brief intro. When I was little, I used to visit this friend of mine very often, both because I loved spending time with them and because my parents weren't at home most of the time because of work. This friend of mine had a nanny that had to look after them and also had to do some chores like cleaning, cooking for them, and helping them do their homework. The problem with her, we will call her the entitled nanny, was the fact that she wouldn't always do those things and would rather sit on the couch, watch movies, and stay on her phone. So my friend wouldn't always do their homework, and because of that, they didn't have very good grades, and their parents were quite concerned about it. But when they asked the entitled nanny about it, she'd say that she tried to make them study, but they simply wouldn't listen to her. My friend's parents believed in her in the first place, but after some time they started noticing that she wasn't doing the other things she had to do and started considering firing her. She remained with my friend for another month or so before things went the wrong way, and she found out that the parents were going to fire her. My friend and I were in the room watching a movie when suddenly we heard the nanny screaming that they couldn't fire her and that she always had done the chores and everything she was asked to do, but she didn't know that my friend told them otherwise. But when the parents told the nanny that they knew that she was lying, she rushed to the room where my friend and I were and locked the door. But when the parents arrived, the following conversation occurred. Note, I was 6 when it happened, so I don't remember everything in detail. Hey, what are you doing? I am going to take her away. You don't deserve her. I am the one who raised her, so she's better off with me than you. If you don't let me go with her and her friend, I will call CPS and tell them that you took her from me. Yes, she really said that. I am calling the cops if you won't leave this house right now. You can call whoever you want, you stupid son of a witch. I am not leaving. The parent proceeds to call the police and tell them what's happened. At this point, both my friend and I were terrified. But when the police arrived and the parents went outside to talk to them, the nanny unlocked the door, grabbed me and my friend by the arm, and dragged us to the garage where her car was. She then made us get in the back seat and tried to drive off. But luckily, one of the police cars was parked in front of the garage door, so she couldn't escape. And after that, she got dragged outside of the car. The nanny got arrested and sentenced to 13 years of jail and 10 more years of probation, plus she had to pay 4,500 euros to the parents, which the parents saved from my friend's college funds. To this day, we're big friends, and we work for an international transport company. I was out earlier today to get some groceries. It was an uneventful shopping trip for the few things I went out for. This happened when I tried to get in a cab I had called for myself. When my cab pulled up, it was one of the owners, whom I'm good friends with, as well as her husband. I exclusively use their company and they will give me deals sometimes, like not charging for an extra passenger, or if they see me walking, they will stop for me and not charge me. The cab driver, whom I will call Claudia, helped me load my groceries into the trunk of the car. I put the cart along with the other carts, and when I went to get into the cab, there was a woman sitting there. She had locked the back door so I couldn't get in, and she stared straight ahead so she didn't make eye contact with me. I said to Claudia, I thought I called for the cab. Who is that lady? Claudia looked in the backseat window on her side and said, I don't know, but she's getting out. This is your ride. Claudia opened her door and nicely explained to the woman that the cab was already hired, so she had to get out. But she will get on a radio and get someone else there right away. This woman was having none of it. I got in the cab first, so it's my cab. Just shut up and get in and take me to wherever she wanted to go. Claudia told her she needed to get out because this cab was taken again. She tried to open the door to get the woman out, but every time she hit the unlock button, the woman would lock the doors faster than Claudia could unlock and open them. Then Claudia just reached into the cab, took out the keys, and told the woman she was calling the police if she didn't exit right away. Then a woman lurched over to the front seat and locked all the doors. Claudia had the keys and could have opened the lock at any time, but instead she kept to her word and called the police. The police station is literally across the street from the shopping center, so they were there in less than 5 minutes. When they did arrive, we told them what was going on, and they ordered her out of the cab. She sat there stone-faced and ignored the 2 police officers completely. They got Claudia to unlock the doors and were quicker at getting the door open than she was at locking it. One officer ordered her out of the cab. She turns to him and says, "I am not getting out. This is my cab and I will stay. And that driver better get herself behind the wheel before I press charges." At the same time, as the first officer was talking to her, the other jumped in the back seat and basically shoved her out of the door. Once she and the second officer were out, the first officer shut the door and Claudia locked it. This woman may have been dressed like a lady, and to be honest, she wasn't hard on the eyes, but the gates of hell had just been opened. This complete psycho slapped Officer 1 and was turning to punch Officer 2 when she froze and stiffened with the most ungodly sounds coming from her as Officer 2 tased her. They put her in cuffs and had to wait for the ambulance for the taser barbs to be removed by an EMT. Claudia and I were told we could go. We weren't needed anymore. Since she assaulted an officer, our petty little squabble is nothing now. We still have to make statements, but those are going to wait until Monday. 1. So she can sit in jail all weekend, and 2. Because it was near the end of their shifts, and by the time they were done with the paperwork, it would be quitting time for them anyway. And 3rd, and most importantly, Claudia is a sister of Officer 1. I'm sure Claudia will keep me posted on everything, and the good thing, other than the entertainment, is that Claudia gave me a free drive home and helped unload the groceries. I'm glad I didn't buy ice cream. Update: I talked to Claudia last night. From what her brother told her, that woman cried the whole weekend in jail. She tried buying her way out many times. At court, she pleaded guilty to almost all the charges. She wouldn't admit to hitting the cop, but there was dashcam video showing it clearly. The judge said she was guilty of that as well. I guess there were about 8 charges in total. She was found guilty of all of them. When the judge gave her her punishment, I was told she screamed at the judge, "It's not fair," and tried to offer the judge money so she wouldn't go back to jail. For some reason, the court didn't charge her for trying to bribe a judge, but for everything else, she earned. The judge gave her a total of $2,500 in fines, €1 probation, €1 of suspended license, 6 months of suspended jail sentence, and the rest of this week in jail. She will be out Friday, Claudia said. Not me, but a guy I worked with 10 years ago. I guess it counts as revenge. I worked with a guy who really stuck it to his ex-wife. When I met him, he was working in a sporting goods store, making $8 an hour. He was not really like the other retail monkeys. He was older, well-groomed, well-spoken, clearly educated, and so on. One night after work, he gets into his car and I couldn't help but notice that it was a very nice, newish Jaguar. I asked him how he could afford it and he explained it to me. He had been an SVP at a well-known Fortune 50 company, which I will not mention the name of, pulling in $300,000 with bonuses and stock options. He was married, but the marriage fell apart, and in a divorce she demanded that she get the house at 40% of his wages. He and his lawyer somehow managed to get her to agree to let him keep the house in exchange for 75% of his pay. No dollar figure or employer specified. As soon as she took the settlement, he quit his job and looked for a minimum wage job. He said to me she gets 75% of nearly nothing now. He had other money stashed away, so he didn't even need the job. And he had the house and its equity as well. Also, there were no kids, so there were no child support, just alimony. She was furious, of course, and tried to sue him but failed at least once. And when she claimed that the settlement was not keeping her in a lifestyle she was accustomed to, he simply told the judge that the divorce was traumatic to him and he could no longer do his old job as a result. At least at that time, she did not manage to get out of the deal. I'm not sure how it all ended, but I thought it was brilliant. Crazy level spiteful. He was a good employee too, good with customers, showed up on time, no nonsense absenteeism or anything like that. He claimed he loved each payday because it reminded him how little she was getting. It's been 2 years and I can finally post about this. This is juicy, so get ready. Background information. We live in an old and big manor that has been split into 3 attached houses. The houses are about 150 years old and were built around 5 huge, giant sequoias, which were about 200 years old. In the UK, giant sequoias are very rare, and the 2 in our garden raised the house price by about £60,000. We lived next to 2 really nice neighbors, one young couple and one old couple. The story. Unfortunately, our old neighbors passed away, so their child and her family moved in. Let's call her Jo. Jo was instantly a pain in the butt. We have been sharing chickens with the previous neighbors, and Jo agreed to keep sharing them. However, on her nights, she would constantly forget to put them away, so we would have to check them every night anyway. One night, her little brat thought it would be funny to open our personal dog pen at night, which led to a mass slaughter later. Later, the chickens went the same way. About 2 years ago, there was a storm, and one of her sequoias somehow fell over and died. They were distraught, understandably, but from then on, the jealousy started. She would constantly complain about how lucky we were to have 2 sequoias in our garden and how our sequoia was making too much shade in their garden. Well, it wasn't. Anyway, we just thought it was Jo being a pain. There were a few dry threats like they would chop it down or maybe the next storm would blow it down, until we came back from a holiday in France to find a huge 6-meter stump and nothing else. I mean, how do you get rid of a 100-foot tree in like 2 weeks? 2 of our old British oak trees had been crushed as well. My mom and sisters were crying, my dad was red in the face. We had no evidence Jo had done it. She claimed that there had been a storm and she had to get rid of it. We had a security camera at the front of the house, but you can get in the back if you go through a few fields. We were then given an £8,000 bill for damages to her property, and to have the tree chopped up and removed would have been worth a small fortune. We had lost all hope, and 2 weeks had passed when my dad came running in from the garden. We had put up a wildlife camera a few months ago and had caught everything. We got a lawyer on the phone and started our revenge. We got a tree surgeon out who said it was an original specimen brought into the UK in 1860, along with the 2 that were in Elveston Castle Country Park. There were 218 around the UK, but only 60 now. He also told us to call out an engineer because the roots might be in the foundation, so when they rot, it could damage the house. It turns out we would need to redo the foundations. Then, we took Jo to court and sued them for damage to property, trespassing, and lots of other smaller claims. The tree would cost $250,000 to have another sequoia that was 200 years old put in and looked after. It's basically impossible. Plus the damage to the foundation, which was around $200,000, and the 2 oaks, which were another $25,000. So with the smaller claims it went to about $500,000, around $700,000. They had to move out. We have now paid off the mortgage, done a lovely loft and kitchen conversion, and basically done up the house and garden, as well as planted a 60-year-old sequoia tree in the back garden. We also had our kitchen counter and table made from the old sequoia. We now have a new lovely family living next to us who we share chickens, ducks, and pygmy goats with. They are very nice, and I make a fortune babysitting their kids. Edit. Many of you wanted to hear about the court case, but she didn't stand a chance. And as soon as we revealed the footage to her and her lawyer, she gave up. The people who cut the tree down gave us the countertops for free as a sincere apology. They were truly sorry. The neighbors had a second home, so they just sold the house and moved back to their smaller one. We feel bad for the old neighbors, but we do visit their graves because they were like family. Shout out to all of my Subway friends. Our story begins at a previous job, Subway. One of our sister stores had shut down and they were offloading various equipments to other stores, so we ended up getting their bread rack. These things aren't the biggest, but we didn't have a big store, and we already had one. So we have this overflowing back room with 2 bread racks, one partially blocking the fire exit. I was getting more and more annoyed when finally a few days later I asked him one more time, "So we absolutely have to use it?" And Bob, the manager, looks at me like I ate crayons for breakfast and said, "I already told you that." Well, if I have to use it, I was never told how I had to use it. Cue a malicious compliance. I waited until Bob left for the day, then the fun began. For starters, I made a spot against the wall that would fit our bread rack. I unscrewed the glass door, then took out all the shelving units, then even the metal guide racks on the side. I then threw in some empty bread trays and a few of the guide racks back and converted it from a bread rack to a miscellaneous storage rack. It actually looked pretty good. Bob wasn't back around to our store for another few days, but when he returned, Bob goes to the back, starts doing his weekly checklist, and then stops at the bread rack turned storage cabinet. He turns around and goes, "What the hell did this?" My coworker and I shared a very cheeky grin. I owned it and said I did. He asked why, looking all the world like he was ready to write me up. And I politely informed Bob that I had asked to get rid of it, and he had told me multiple times to use the bread rack no matter what. He shakes his head in disappointment and goes back to his list. And we go back to our usual sandwich shenanigans. A few days later, our impromptu storage rack had inexplicably disappeared, and Bob was much more careful about how he chose his wording from then on.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.